Hello, genealogists. It's Craig, and it's just genealogy. As promised a while back, I said I would do a talk on my trip to New Orleans and the various battlefields that I visited. So this is the first of those, although if you count the Chalmette National Cemetery one a while back, maybe this is the second. But I don't really care. Anyway, so what we're going to talk about today is the Ronde battle on the 23rd of December, 1814, below New Orleans. Now, these are all part of the Chalmette Plantations. The town where this battle took place is Chalmette, just like the Battle of New Orleans was in Chalmette. This is the area of New Orleans that we're talking about. It's about 4 miles, 3 to 4 or 5 miles south of New Orleans along the river. What we're going to talk about today is the battle that occurred on the plantation of Pierre Denis de la Ronde. So in the lead up to this, the British landed, and Major Gabriel Villeray encountered some British. They came to visit him at his plantation, actually his father's plantation, where Gabriel and his brother were at, and some Louisiana militia, and the British showed up, and the story is that the British were very kind and said, we're being nice to Frenchmen, we're being nice to Spaniards, and Gabriel said, but I'm an American, and then they said, well, then you're under arrest. And he managed to escape through a window and wander through the brush until he got to New Orleans. Along the way, he climbed a tree, and he had a dog that was his favorite dog, and his dog followed him and started barking at him in the tree, so he had to come down out of the tree and rather rudely silence the dog permanently. He climbed back up the tree. The British gave up looking for him, and he headed for New Orleans. And he got to General Jackson. That's Andrew Jackson. And Jackson decided it was time to lead about 2,000 men up against the British before they got well situated. And then when it was all said and done, he pulled his forces back to the Rodriguez Canal, which was about 4 miles south of the city. Now, Villeray was the son of Major General Jacques-Philippe Villeray, who was in fact in command of the Louisiana Militia. There's an excellent website on the Villeray family and their involvement in the Battle of New Orleans. There's a flip book. I've never heard that phrase before, but that's what they describe it as. There's a book out there on the Villeray family. Villeray, turns out, the Major General, that is, Jacques, will become the second governor of Louisiana and the first native-born Louisianan to be governor of Louisiana. He's governor from 1816 to 1820. And that pamphlet that's online is actually a really good read. Now, years ago, I went and visited this site when I was, I don't know, I guess it was in the 70s, before Katrina. And my memory of this is that things were much taller, things were not this clean, and there was a lot of dirt, not much grass at all. But this is the Rende Plantation, and I'll show it to you where it is on a map in a second. And as you're standing on this plot of land and you're looking towards the river, you're looking down into this grove of trees that go all the way to the river. And there's also some sort of oil plant next door. It used to be the Tenneco plant until Katrina. It's something else now. And I believed at that point in time, years ago, that this was the grove of trees that my third great-grandfather, Samuel Thomas Scott, held horses in when everybody else went off to fight. Somehow he was wounded in the arm in 2 places in the battle, but he was supposed to be tending while tending horses, so I'm a little confused, but that's beside the point. So I thought he was in this grove, which basically was the roadway that extended from the plantation house down to the river. La Ronde was a colonel in the 3rd Louisiana Regiment, that's militia, and the British would use this house as a headquarters and hospital on the 8th of January during the Battle of New Orleans. And it's located on West St. Bernard Highway in Chalmette, Louisiana, and there is an entry for it out in the Clio. When you look on a map, you can see the difference between the two places. Where the 2 is where this plantation house is, and then the Chalmette battlefield, that's where the Battle of New Orleans takes place a couple of weeks later. There's a road called Paris Road that comes down. That's the road that is just to the right of the 2, and I can tell you that I was driving down Paris Road coming from Walgreens and turned right, and all of a sudden I was there. And I don't remember it being that easy to get to when I was a kid. But that said, this is where it all is, and this is south of New Orleans. Now, there are a couple of maps available in the Library of Congress. I like this one because you can read it. And you can see the La Ronde Plantation on the left. You can see the La Costa Plantation. He's also involved in the Louisiana Militia. And then the Villeray Plantation on the right, and the Jumonville plantation farther down. And the British pretty much fill up from the Villeray Plantation west as part of their shenanigans. But this is the day, the night of the 23rd, when Jackson attacks. Now, I've only really been able to identify 2 specific groups of people that are involved in this battle so far. And one of those is General Coffey's brigade, and the other is the Mississippi Dragoons under Major Hines. There may have been other people there, and I'll go over that in a minute. But generally, what we're seeing here is the movement of Coffey. And you see this dotted line that wanders through La Ronde Plantation and then along the canal until they cross the canal. And 2 companies are left to guard the horses. And my ancestor, Samuel Thomas Scott, was left to guard the horses, where he was wounded in his arm in 2 places. So this tells me that I have a problem, because I have been under the assumption all of this time that he was guarding houses in that grove of trees, which is pretty much where the battle ended, there at the plantation house. There is another map in the Library of Congress which I like also, and it has a little bit different information, but a much nicer map, but I always need a magnifying glass when I need to read it. The other one's much clearer and lets you know what the plantations are, but you can still see the movement of Coffey's troops as it goes through the night. In that grove of trees that I've been talking about is a monument to the Louisiana Militia, and it says that this is where the Louisiana Militia was during the battle. Not General Coffey's brigade of West Tennessee Mounted Gunmen, although this is pretty much where they ended up when it was all said and done. So interestingly enough, when you look on the map, you do see this little place that says 2 companies dismounted to take care of the horses. General Coffey dismounted his troops here, so they moved his infantry. Well, that's what mounted gunmen do, is they ride to a place, they get off their horses, and they act as infantry. That's the difference between mounted gunmen and dragoons. they don't, in this scenario, in this time frame, dragoons and mounted gunmen pretty much perform the same function. They dismount and then fight. Later on, cavalry is that which fights from horseback. Dragoons are those that dismount. So that's, and the interesting thing is that on the map, that's about where the Walgreens is, plus or minus 500 feet, I think. Although I haven't laid the maps on top of each other, that's just my sense. So pretty much Paris Road is right there. So I can tell you who was engaged at New Orleans. Not so much who was engaged in this battle, but it's likely that if they were... Not everybody who was engaged at New Orleans were in this battle. We do know that Coffey's brigade was there. So we see at New Orleans is Carroll's brigade with 3 regiments of West Tennessee Militia, Coffey's brigade with 2 regiments of West Tennessee Volunteer Mounted Gunmen, and also part of Cherokee's brigade was a group of Choctaws. There is a Kentucky brigade there, Adair's brigade, but I don't think they're at the La Ronde battle. And there is the U.S. Army. They are at the battle because I find people dying on this date from these units, but I don't exactly know where they were on the field. So those are also the U.S. Army regiments that are present. There's also a Marine detachment. It appears that there might be 2 detachments of dragoons, but they may be the same unit with split into pieces. There also are several regiments of Louisiana militia at New Orleans. I mean, they're pretty much, since it's their state, too numerous to count, but some that we do know of are the Battalion of Orleans, Lacoste Free Men of Color, Duquesne's Free Men of Color, Beale's City Rifles, and then there are the Jean Lafitte's privateer crews who will be manning artillery during the January 8th battle. And in the reserves in the January 8th battle are Hines and Mississippi Dragoons, and we know they were present on the 23rd. And then Ogden's 1st Dragoons, again, they're being held in reserve. And then Harrison's Battalion of Kentucky Militia is also being held in reserve. But all of that's on the 8th, not on the 23rd. We can see Coffey's brigade on the 23rd, and we can see Hines, Mississippi on the 23rd. And because of some deaths on the 23rd, the 7th and the 44th are probably present at some point somewhere. Hard to tell. So I can tell you some of the people who died on the 23rd. Andrew M. Alexander was a private in Captain Jesse Barnes's company of Tennessee Militia. Probably, because I can't locate a Captain Jesse Barnes, it's probably George Barnes, and he's in the 2nd West Tennessee Militia. So that's something that I'm going to have to check out. This information is pretty much taken from his wife Nancy when she applies for her pension payments, of which she gets 2, and she's residing in Davidson County. The other place that I got the information was Byron Sisler's book on Tennessee in the War of 1812, and he doesn't identify what regiment it's in, that I can tell. Abner King is a private in McMahon's company in Dyer's regiment, and he is also killed on the 23rd. He's identified in a pension register in the... You've heard me talk about this register before. There are 24 registers, and then there's 1 register. He's identified in the 1 register. He's identified by the Chalmette muster rolls, and he's identified by Sisler. His wife, Rebecca, remarried a man by the name of Dobson after 22 December 1819. Then there's James Lauderdale, who's a lieutenant colonel, and he's in Coffey's Tennessee Mounted Gunman, and he's definitely killed on the 23rd. And he's in Sisler, and KMD, which is known dead in the known military dead in the War of 1812 by Stuart, has his name spelled as Landerdale. Now, Lemons is a good example of what a War of 1812 half pay looks like when it's full of records. This is William Lemons. He's a saddler in Captain Ephraim Dixon's company, Tennessee Mounted Gunmen, which is part of Dyer's regiment. He's killed in battle on the 23rd below New Orleans. He's in Sisler. He's in the Tennessee volume of the 24 volumes. And the Secretary of War report says that his name is William Lemons. His wife is Sally. He has children, Sally, Polly, Jane, James, Melindy, and William. And their dates of birth are provided, which is really cool. There is a paymaster account in entry 516 of record group 217, paymaster account 3588 of 10 December 1816, and then 3 abstracts, 2 of them in Bedford County and 1 of them in Davidson County. These are her being paid. And these abstracts are read as abstract 1300, and they may be dated or they may have a number. So the second one is abstract 3, and it's account number 221. The third one is abstract 3781, and the account number is 125. If you query me about what places have account numbers in these series of records, these abstracts are also in 217 in I think it's entry 728 off the top of my head, but it may be 732. So that's what a pretty much full War of 1812 widow half pay looks like. Michael McClellan is a captain in the 7th U.S. Infantry, and he is killed on the 23rd of December in the battle below New Orleans. That's how I know that the 7th U.S. Infantry is present, or at least he is. And he shows up in known military dead, Heitman's register of officers, the Chalmette list, and a New Orleans muster list. William McMahon is a private in Collins Company, 1st Regiment of Tennessee Militia, and that is part of Carroll's brigade. But no, it doesn't say here that he dies in battle below New Orleans. It doesn't actually say killed or anything like that, anything that I can find, just that he's died. So he may have died at New Orleans, but not in this battle, and he may have died in this battle also. Sisler has Mcmahon. He's in the 23rd of those 24 pension registers. There is a Secretary of War report. His wife's name is Belle, and I don't know whether her name is Belle McMahon or whether her name is Belle because she remarried. There is a paymaster account, but I was unable to locate any abstracts. Edmund Mills is a private in Hudson's Company, Dyer's regiment, and he dies on the 23rd. Chalmette says his name is Edward rather than Edmund. You always have to look out for these kind of things. I actually don't pay much attention to it. And Sisler has him as Edmund. Then we have Marcus Moore, who's a sergeant in Robert Moore's company, Tennessee Mounted Gunmen. Actually, I think this is the company, Robert Moore's company is the company that my third great-grandfather is in, and he's killed on the 23rd at the battle. And again, we have that pension register from Tennessee and the Secretary of War report. Mary Moore doesn't have any children, but she does have a paymaster account and some abstracts. And the paymaster account tells us that the soldier married on the 14th of December, 1813. Abraham Nolan, spelled a variety of different ways. He's a farrier in Captain Thomas White's company of dragoons, Tennessee Militia. I don't know of a company of dragoons in the Tennessee Militia, so I'm going to assume that with further research, this will turn out to be the West Tennessee Mounted Gunmen because they behave as dragoons. Wife Elizabeth and children in July of 1817. Thomas, born 25 February 1816, and John, age 13, on October last. and that would be July of 1817 when they're talking about October last. There is a paymaster account in entry 516, and then there are 4 abstracts, and they're pretty much living in Davidson County. Corporal Aim is a captain in Plebes Regiment of Louisiana Militia, and he dies on the 23rd of December. And John Arnold is in Captain Joseph Williams' company of Dyer's Regiment, West Tennessee Mounted Gunman, and he also dies there. And he's also found, unlike many of the other people, these two are found in a list of, an Army list of losses, discharges, and those kind of things. Brown is in Dyer's Regiment, and he's killed on the 23rd. Cummings George is in Beale's company, and I think Beale's company is those city rifles. So he's part of a Louisiana militia, and he shows up in the Chalmette list in the New Orleans muster. Eddington Luke is a sergeant in Bethel Allen's company, which is the 1st Regiment of West Tennessee Volunteer Mounted Gunmen. So that makes it Dyer's. He's in Sisler. He's in that Tennessee Ledger, and that Secretary of War report says Eddington with 2 D's. His wife's name is Annie or Anna, and there are a couple of abstracts, but no paymaster report. Then there's Henry Foote, and tomorrow or soon I'll talk about Henry because I'm going to use him as an example in the Register of Enlistments. When I talk about the Register of Enlistments, he's a private in the 44th U.S. Infantry. He's from Maryland, and he's killed on the 23rd. And he shows up in Maryland casualties in the War of 1812 and Maryland regulars in the War of 1812. And he is found on page 78 of the Register of Enlistments. Charles Forrester is in Captain Isaac Williams' company of Tennessee Mounted Gunmen. I haven't checked to see which regiment that actually is. He's in the usual places. His wife, Barbary, marries John Van Hay on the 15th of June, 1815. He has children, and their years of birth are indicated. They're guardian of Robert Forrester. Whenever you see 2 surnames that are the same, you're probably looking at a father or a brother to the soldier who died, and there are a couple of abstracts. It appears they probably live in Smith County, Tennessee, and then later they go to Davidson County to get paid. William Kelly is a private in Dyer's Regiment. He's also killed, and he shows up on the Chalmette list. His wife Polly remarried Isaac Seagraves on the 9th of May, 1816. They have 2 children, Charles and Nancy, and the guardian is Isaac Seagraves, and you see him being the wife of Polly. So he's now the guardian of the children, and there's an abstract. So what happens in cases like this is Polly May, doesn't appear that this happened here, but what can happen is that the widow gets a pension, she remarries, she's no longer entitled to the pension, so her children get the pension. And this is a case of the children getting the pension because they're coming in after Polly is married. Here's James Fearless. Now, he dies after the 23rd, but before the 28th. And the reason I'm saying the 28th is the general who's in charge of the British will show up on the 25th. His name is Parkham. And then on the 28th, he goes out with a reconnaissance and force against Jackson's lines and then gives up and turns around and goes back for a while and then comes back on the 8th of January. He dies on the 25th, which means he's probably wounded on the 23rd. Wilson Kerr, same thing, happens to him. Or Wilson Carr, it could be Kerr, it could be Carr. And here it appears this is a case where there are children but no widow. So she's either died or she has remarried prior to 23 September 1818 when the children are being covered by a guardian. So you would have to research the guardian further to see if he had a relationship to the children as being their stepfather or something like that. So when it was all said and done, the Americans suffered 24 killed. I've shown you some of them. 115 wounded. I've shown you some of those. And 74 missing. Tactically, the British won this battle because they stayed on the field and the Americans retreated back to the Rodriguez Canal. But what this did do is it gave the Americans time to reinforce their position at the Rodriguez Canal. Had the British continued forward, the Americans were not as prepared as they will eventually be. The British really don't move until the 28th with a reconnaissance in force, and the British withdraw. So what I've attempted to do today is cover this battle in sort of an overview, give you some idea about what records are available for those soldiers who died, give you some idea about what units were on the field, and a little bit about the battle. I think the most important piece for me is the availability of maps in the Library of Congress. That's where those two maps came from. And being able to start with a map is not something I was doing a long time ago when I went there first. I wish I had gone there with a map, and I didn't do that the first time I went. This time I went with a map, and I was better able to orient myself to the field and to walk the field appropriately. And in the next few weeks, couple of weeks, sometime soon, I hope, I'll go further and work on the Battle of New Orleans itself and show you pretty much how things went 2 weeks later with the interaction between the British and the American forces south of New Orleans. So this has been Craig with Just Genealogy, where we're converting people doing genealogy into genealogists day by day. I've had the pleasure of telling you about a battle that my ancestor was in. I love walking the ground of battlefields that my ancestors have been in. Let's face it, I just love walking the battlefields no matter what, even if my ancestors aren't in them. So click that subscribe button, tell your friends. If you know anybody related to any of these dead guys, where there's dates of death of children, you have the responsibility to tell them. Of course, your knowing who those people are is probably rare, but I put it out there. Y'all have a good day.